I'm at the World Economic Forum in Indonesia, being held for the first time in this country. Now, Indonesia is a big story at the moment. It's got a young but secure democracy, a growing economy, and a government that's open for business. And remember, this is the world's fourth most populous country. But what I want to know is whether this country should be considered for membership of that most exclusive of economic clubs, the BRIC countries. BRIC is the brainchild of Goldman Sachs' Jim O'Neill, who coined the phrase in 2001 to describe the big emerging powerhouses: Brazil, Russia, India and China. They now account for 45% of the world's population, a quarter of the landmass and about a quarter of global economic output. So where does Indonesia fit into all this? Well, it's a member of Goldman's other club, the N11 or the Next 11, which are countries with BRIC-like qualities. But does it deserve a place at the top table? We put that question to some delegates here at the WEF.
I think Indonesia should. I think they've got the growth potential, 240 million person economy that can actually grow faster than it is now. You've got to think about it as a strategically important market.
So I'd definitely say it falls in that group of BRICS that, by the way, account for 80% of the global growth.
Definitely, yes. Standard Chartered has just issued a super cycle report where it has suggested that Indonesia will be the fifth largest economy in the world by 2030.
Certainly there's a lot of support here for Indonesia, but let's now take a look at some of the numbers. In sheer economic size, Indonesia has a long way to go. China is still the big beast of the BRICS, weighing in at a $5.8 trillion economy. Russia is the smallest at $1.5 trillion. Indonesia is still less than half of Russia at just over $700 billion. On economic growth, it fits the bill. Forecast growth is 6.4% this year and rising, compared with a similar average rise for the BRICS. And the size of the population fits as well. I put the question to the BRIC godfather himself, Jim O'Neill. He says the key criteria for entry is, quote, an economy that is already or likely to become 3 to 5% of global GDP. He says for Indonesia to do that, it would require years of consecutive 10% growth. Indonesia's investment minister thinks O'Neill is overdue for a visit to look at how and how fast Indonesia is growing.
If he comes to Jakarta, he'll see what I'm talking about, and I think we certainly deserve to be a BRIC or a BRIC-y member.
A lot, though, will depend on this man, President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, to lay a bedrock for the country's long-term growth. He faces tough challenges, from building a new infrastructure network to tackling what the WEF calls widespread corruption. But what is impossible to ignore is the sense of optimism and confidence this country has at the moment. Andrew Stevens, CNN, Jakarta.
No, we're good. Thank you.
A relaxed Saturday afternoon among friends in central Jakarta. All under 30, Michelangelo Moran, Nicole Lee and Grace Italiander grew up here and watched this city transform.
There's so many malls now. There's so many malls. I feel like they're getting bigger and bigger.
I think I never went to a concert in high school ever. And now there's one every weekend. It's great.
Educated abroad, they return to Jakarta to live, work and spend. They're among the millions of Indonesian consumers that drive this country's growth story. About 60% of the country's GDP comes from domestic spending. It was the reason Indonesia emerged from the financial crisis virtually unscathed.
Commodities are very important as a fundamental sort of underpinner of growth, but compared to a lot of the economies in Asia, it is more consumption driven here. I mean, certainly compared to China.
Retail outlets are springing up across the country.
All our fashion brands, Zara, Marks & Spencer, Next.
VP Sharma is CEO of MAP, one of Indonesia's biggest retailers. MAP now has 900 stores across 25 cities, selling more than 90 international brands, from fashion to sports to travel to fast food.
Our target is a middle income group.
This year alone, MAP will add another 300 plus stores.
Indonesian middle class consumer, they are very brand conscious. number one. Number two, they have a tendency to consume more, like enjoy today, save tomorrow.
Local brands like the goods department are also beginning to gain traction.
I think it represents the modern Indonesian youth culture, that they are progressive, they are independent.
Developing its own brands at home is one challenge for Indonesia, another changing the country's image abroad. Moran says perceptions of Jakarta have not necessarily kept pace with the city's progress.
There was always this whole negative perception of Jakarta because there was just a lot of riots, there would be a lot of bombings and stuff like that. And as you can see, there's so many foreigners now coming to Jakarta, so it's definitely changed.
This is the emerging Indonesia, more confident and economically stronger, underpinned by a rising middle class with money to spend. Andrew Stevens, CNN, Jakarta.